The San Andreas Fault connects the North American and Pacific tectonic plates and extends for 1,200 kilometers through California, but scientists have just announced that it's about to crack. If you're in California, this announcement from the Southern California Center will probably send a chill down your spine. The southern portion of the fault is locked, loaded, and ready to go. But what new evidence have they discovered, and what does it mean for California residents? Join us as we tell you what massive thing the San Andreas Fault is about to do. The San Andreas Fault is in dire straits. In a recent announcement by the director of the Southern California Earthquake Center, Thomas Jordan, remarked that the San Andreas Fault appears to be in a critical state and as a result could produce a significant earthquake in the very near future. He was referring to the fault's location in California. The reiteration of Californians' seismic threat will of course not surprise anyone. Still, the warning that has been issued is entirely brand new, as if people in California don't have enough to worry about as it is. So how did this evidence come to light? What possible reasons could this well-known seismologist have for making such alarming statements? As a result of the lack of a significant earthquake in that region since 1857, the southern portion of the San Andreas Fault system has not experienced a substantial release of stresses in that time. The San Andreas Fault is just one of several fault systems roughly characterizing the boundary between the North American and Pacific tectonic plates. Other fault systems include the Cascadia Subduction Zone and the Cascadia Active Fault. From another perspective, the San Andreas is a mountain range that stretches across California. Both plates are moving toward the north. However, the Pacific plate is moving at a significantly faster velocity than its counterpart on the North American continent, indicating a steady buildup of strain between the two plates as time goes on. But what does the historical precedent show us? Some of these tensions were released devastatingly in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1906 during an event of 7.8 magnitude, and then again in the Northern California region in 1989 with a Loma Prieta earthquake which had a magnitude of 6.9. The state of California was the scene of each of these events. Events of these magnitudes, however, have not occurred along the San Andreas Fault in the southern part of the state. The 1994 Northridge event was associated with a nearby but separate fault system, suggesting that an earthquake is imminent before 2032. Given the amount of stress that might have accumulated when it arrives, this earthquake will be the big one. Along the San Andreas Fault in the northern part of the state, earthquakes of this magnitude have never occurred before. So just how big is a big earthquake? How devastating could this potential earthquake be? And how realistic is it to think that the destruction seen in the movie San Andreas could actually take place? In a nutshell, people of the state of California will be, at least to some degree, content with the answers to the questions posed. In the film, the San Andreas Fault is the source of an earthquake with a magnitude of 9. In most cases, earthquakes of this magnitude can only be found in regions experiencing subduction, a process by which one tectonic plate is pushed below another. For instance, Chile and Japan are examples of places currently undergoing subduction. The seismic activity that occurs in California is not the same as that which occurs in other states. At this particular juncture, the two plates are slipping past one another as they move along a common path. Researchers now believe that the largest earthquake that could occur along the San Andreas Fault system is an 8, even though there is only a 7% probability that it will appear in Southern California over the next 30 years. On the other hand, there is a possibility that an event with a magnitude of 7 will take place during the same time. This possibility has a probability of 75%. Even though it might not seem like much of a difference between magnitudes 7, 8, and 9, the quantity of energy produced by these events is considerably different. A magnitude 9 event would release 1,000 times more energy than a magnitude 7 event, and a magnitude 9 event would release 32 times more energy than a magnitude 8 event. So is there any way to avoid the damage and destruction? Damage will occur regardless of how large the earthquake is, whether it's 7 or 8 on the Richter scale. Nonetheless, the entire series of events depicted in the movie is exceptionally improbable to ever occur in real life. For example, the San Andreas Fault does not cross any body of water. As a result, any movement along it cannot displace water to the extent that would result in the generation of a tsunami. Since the tectonic plates are sliding relative to one another rather than away from one another, it's less fiction and more reality that a gigantic chasm might form. Nevertheless, we can't deny one thing: a sizable amount of property will be lost in the process. Constructing a building entirely free from the risk of damage if an earthquake occurs is impossible, even though California has stringent building codes that prohibit the construction of new buildings near known fault lines and recommend that older buildings be retrofitted with seismic protection measures. So what would the damage look like? To better understand the effects of a large earthquake in the southern part of the San Andreas Fault, the United States Geological Survey modeled a 7.8 magnitude event with slippage of 2 to 7 meters to represent the stresses that have built up in the area since the last large event. Using this model, scientists concluded that the structures that straddled the fault would experience the largest damage due to the earthquake. We should give thanks to the legislation like the Alquist-Priolo Earthquake Fault Zoning Act enacted in 1972 has made such schemes extremely uncommon. But this shift might affect 966 roads, 90 fiber optic cables, 39 gas pipes, and 141 electricity lines that run over the fault zone. It was estimated that the total cost of damage to structures would be $33 billion, with modern buildings sustaining less damage than older ones, which were especially vulnerable to harm. The situation was favorable for modern structures, but as gas and water mains are ruptured, fires will break out much as they did after the Northridge earthquake. In fact, the damage that will result from the fires is projected to be more costly than the damage that would result from the initial shaking of the earth. As a direct result of the accident, it's estimated that 1,800 individuals will lose their lives. And just when it seems as though things couldn't possibly get any worse, the major event will have destabilized the tectonics of the region to such an extent that a series of aftershocks that have the potential to be quite powerful will begin. This will happen just when it seems as though things can't possibly get any worse. As an illustration, Christchurch, New Zealand was struck by an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.2 in 2011. Ever since then, the city and the region surrounding it have been subjected to more than 10,000 aftershocks combined. So is there any good news? The good news is that the movie San Andreas is wholly made up and features the same amount of exaggeration that we're all accustomed to seeing from filmmakers who, strangely enough, also have their headquarters in Southern California. Do they have a sort of morbid fascination with passing away? Even though they could film these stories anyplace else, California is almost always the setting. It's possible they just hate where they live. Anyway, let's not get off topic. Despite this, there is a good chance that the San Andreas Fault will be responsible for a significant earthquake in the not-too-distant future. If it does come, it will cause tremendous destruction, and Southern California will be significantly impacted due to its consequences. However, the people who live in California are accustomed to dealing with natural disasters of this kind. In more recent years, the physical buildings of the state have been created with protection against earthquakes in mind. It's kind of like adjusting to new weights at the gym, except instead of weights, it's the full fury of the tectonic plates of the continent. So what do we have to worry about? To recap, an announcement by Thomas Jordan has indicated that built-up pressure between the North American and Pacific tectonic plates will, in all likelihood, result in an earthquake with seismic repercussions. History shows us that the San Andreas Fault has been responsible for devastating earthquakes before. The research concluded that the damages from such an earthquake would be, to put it bluntly, a lot. The only good news is that we know that the damage will not be on the scales Hollywood would want you to believe. You don't have to worry about tsunamis or deep chasms again. This isn't the movie 2012, but you should be ready for a lot of shaking, a lot of damage to buildings, fires that get out of control, and hugely harmful economic effects because the whole area will be shut down for a long time. So it is kind of like the movie 2012.